reality is, it's like we all have that though. Like you said, in that imposter syndrome thing, I felt that today before we got on the call. I'm like, oh my goodness, I get to talk to you today. I actually just had a conversation with someone else about that. We downplay our own strengths and who we are. And as opposed to just like saying, this is who we are and I'm worthy with who we are.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, for sure. Like, honestly, so I was just talking to my husband yesterday, and I'm interviewing a Navy SEAL who's going to be on my podcast, who he was shot 8 times, and he's got 2 New York Times best-selling books and blah, blah. And I was telling my husband, I was like, oh my God, I'm interviewing this person, and he's done this, and he's got 2 books and blah, blah, blah. And my husband was like, I don't know what you're talking about. He was like, you've overcome just as much. Like, you've overcome 34 surgeries. He was like, I don't know why you're putting him on this pedestal and you're freaking out about him and blah, blah, blah. And my husband was like, really kind of like gave it to me straight. Like, Amberly, you have done as much as he has. Even though you haven't been through SEAL training, you went through 34 surgeries, you went through hell and back. Like, why are you putting him way above yourself? Like, you know what I mean? And so my husband kind of like really shifted my perspective with that. And I don't mean to put anybody above me or below me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there are some times when, I don't know about you, but like for me, when I'm going to interview somebody, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're so amazing. Like, oh, I gotta I'm preparing for weeks and I've read their book and I've done this and I've done that. But he's like, dude, they're just a person. Like,
yeah,
just talk to them, And I'm like, you know what? You're right.
Yeah, I think it's remembering who we are and just coming back to like our deserve level. I feel like, we talk ourselves out of these situations. I mean, and we beat ourselves. I have that same conversation with my husband all the time. I mean, how great is it that we both have husbands that are cheerleaders? Because all the time.
Really?
And he'll be like, look at your
really.
Yeah. He'll like read back to me my resume, and I'm like, not a big deal. And he's like, look what you've done with your life. And we don't see ourselves. We don't love on ourselves. We don't give ourselves that grace. I mean, to really show up who we are. And we put people on pedestals in a way that like doesn't mean they don't deserve and they haven't done something great, but it doesn't mean that we have to diminish our light.
You're right. And you know what? It's so interesting because I have one of my clients, actually, she's a freaking big time producer at Sony.
Yeah.
And I remember I had worked with her for years before I knew exactly what she did. And she wanted me to review her resume one day. And I was like, oh, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, let me help you edit that or whatever. And then her resume was in the back of my car, and my daughter got in the back of my car and she read the resume. She goes, oh my gosh. She goes, is this Debbie? This is Debbie? Like, this is what she does. This, what? Like, you know what I mean? And so it was like, I know her. I didn't think about her as anyone else other than that this is what I'm going to help you do. I don't know, it was more of a physical training program. She didn't really tell me what she did. My daughter knew her for years before she knew that she was a badass, producer at Sony. But then I still have to remind her. I was like, Debbie, do you know? Do you remember who you are? Like, who you are as a person, but also, do you know your job title? Like, can I share your resume with you again? Because you're a badass. You know what I mean? So I think sometimes we need people to believe in us before we can believe in ourselves. And I think sometimes we need people to love us before we can love ourselves.